So you might have heard that besides Tesla, Elon Musk has another company that does some things, some not too impressive things, like for example, laying a freaking rocket that has flown to space on a tiny drone ship in the middle of the ocean. Some not too impressive stuff like that. I'm not impressed. No. Elon Musk's goal with SpaceX has always been to land on Mars, and now since not too long, they also want to land on the Moon. But how exactly does SpaceX want to achieve these extraordinary goals? Stay tuned to find out how Elon Musk wants to make humanity a multiplanetary species.
We often hear people saying, but wait, why do we have to colonize Mars at all? We still have so many problems here on Earth, and space exploration is expensive. Wouldn't that money be better spent here on Earth? Well, let us give you a small motivation why it's a bad idea to only live on Earth forever. If we stay on Earth, we will go extinct with a probability of 100%. Sorry guys, that's just the brutal reality of the universe. The universe is brutal and indifferent to life. Any one of those previous events could wipe humanity out. So we need to go to space. As for the expensiveness, NASA's budget is only 0.5%, that's around $20 billion of the federal budget of the US. On the other hand, the military budget, $686 billion. That is over 30 times more.
Also, don't forget there's a huge list of spin-off technologies which come originally from space exploration, including, for example, supercritical wing for supersonic flight, winglets for airplanes, cloud computing, invisible braces, special insulating foam, memory foam, turbofan engines, emergency blankets, food safety, ear hearing devices, baby food, artificial hearts, air purifiers, osteoporosis treatment, regenerative skin cream, better brain surgery methods, better landmine removal devices, the dustbuster, magnetic fluid speakers, scratch-resistant lenses, the super soaker, wireless headsets, and of course CMOS sensors, which everyone uses in their smartphone cameras. So next time you play a game and use your wireless headset in TeamSpeak, or make a selfie and upload it to the cloud, please take a moment to reflect upon the fact that those technologies would not exist without space exploration. So don't tell me space exploration is useless, okay? Glad that this is out of the way now.
You might have seen photos of a mysterious thing being built in Boca Chica, Texas. These pictures here show the so-called Starhopper. Doesn't look too impressive, does it? But what if we told you that this piece of rocket hardware here is the key to the future of humanity in space? Yeah, the Starhopper here is the test vehicle of the future SpaceX spaceship called Starship that will ultimately enable humans to land on the Moon again and also land on Mars. The Starhopper has been under assembly for a few months now, and the first very short tethered hopping test has already been carried out on the 4th of April this year. The first hopping tests over longer distances will soon be carried out. This is also a test of SpaceX's new Raptor engine, a newly developed engine by SpaceX, which will have twice the thrust of SpaceX's Merlin engine, which is powering the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. 380,000 pounds of thrust compared to just 190,000. So then, after the hopping tests being finished, the orbital prototype of the Starship will be ready, which according to Elon should be finished around June this year, and it could even be launched to space by the end of 2019. Now this is Elon time we are talking here, so let's just add another few months and we'd get early 2020 as a realistic date for the first orbital space tests of the Starship. The Super Heavy rocket will be the heavy lift rocket, which will bring the Starship to orbit. Starship and Super Heavy will have a lift capacity of over 100 tons to low Earth orbit, 100 tons to the Moon, and with orbital refueling, even 100 tons to Mars. But before going to Mars, We are pretty sure that Starship will first land on the moon. Let us elaborate.
In another video we talked about NASA's goal to send astronauts back to the moon by 2024, an incredibly ambitious goal. But 1 year before that, Yusaku Mitsawa's Dear Moon mission will take him and a few selected artists on a round trip around the moon. This basically will serve, in our opinion, as a demonstration mission to convince NASA of the superiority of the Starship and Super Heavy rocket system. In our opinion, NASA will probably have no other choice than to employ the Starship and Super Heavy system to land their astronauts back on the moon in 2024. Not only is Starship and Super Heavy far cheaper than the NASA standard system architecture consisting of SLS and the moon lander, but Starship is also gigantic. It has the interior volume of a jumbo jet. It's basically a flying base. You land on the moon and you immediately have a base and a laboratory where dozens of astronauts can work and bring a huge payload with them. Starship itself is already a moon base. After that, NASA and other space agencies will probably start pumping money into SpaceX, which will then have the funds to regularly fly to the moon and build up the first moon colony. The moon colony will grow very fast in the second half of the 2020s and will probably be employed by many nations, not only the US. All the while, SpaceX's Starship will act as the transportation system of choice to ferry payload and astronauts to the moon and back, and so on and so forth. Now the revenue from the moon business, from Starlink and from other contracts SpaceX has and will now finally enable SpaceX to set its sight on Mars, which has been the plan from the very beginning.
So now, in order to get to Mars, a very cool maneuver needs to be performed in low Earth orbit, which basically involves two starships doing the deed. I mean, come on, just look at this. Are we even allowed to show this? Why can't Starship just fly directly to Mars, you ask? Because the fuel is so heavy, and launching a fueled-up Starship directly from Earth to Mars would greatly reduce the payload that you can bring to Mars. Anyway, after the Starship coitus is finished, the Starship, which is set for destination Mars, now has enough fuel to get 100 tons of payload to Mars, which is Starship itself, dozens of astronauts, 3D printers, inflatable habitats, solar modules, and other stuff the first humans on Mars would need. We assume this can take place sometime in the 2020s, maybe 2026, 2027, but most likely 2028. So then, the glorious day will have arrived when the first humans land on Mars with Starship. It will be an amazing day for humanity and will be remembered for generations to come as one of the most important steps for the human race. So the first Starship has landed on Mars, but what then? How will the first colony be built? SpaceX is pretty vague on that. We only have this animation here that Elon already showed a few years ago.
However, we have to say that this animation is quite inaccurate. The first Mars colony will probably look quite different from this animation, because it will need to shelter the future Martians from cosmic and solar radiation. Mars has no magnetic field like Earth, so high-energy particles from the Sun or from cosmic sources constantly bombard the surface of Mars without any hindrance. This will cause DNA damage and greatly increase the risk of cancer. Now, of course, there are some possibilities what you can do in order to avoid that. For example, you can use 3D printing technology to 3D print kind of a dome or a cupola out of Martian soil above and around your base. This 3D printed dome would basically have a thickness high enough to shield the base from over 95% of incoming radiation. Or you can build a base underground from the beginning in one of the many Martian caves which already have been discovered. Already 10 meters below ground, the cosmic and solar radiation would completely vanish. Anyways, huge payloads of equipment, 3D printers, habitat modules, inflatable habitats, whatever, has to also be taken along with Starship to Mars. Inflatable habitat modules will probably be the most logical choice, because they are very light and need very little space while being deflated and can be inflated to huge volumes. So after the first Starship has landed and the first small base is established, we will probably see many more Starships land and the base will be expanded step by step. But you might ask yourself, how will all those Starships get back to Earth? Well, bringing the necessary propellant for the return trip to Earth with you would be insane, because the propellant is so heavy, you basically could not take any payload with you anymore. So you have to create the fuel for the return trip to Earth directly on Mars. While Starship's Raptor engines use liquid methane and liquid oxygen as propellants. Fortunately, both oxygen and methane can be easily created on Mars. Carbon dioxide is plentiful on Mars because Mars' atmosphere consists almost entirely of carbon dioxide, and Mars still has gigantic water reserves, especially at the pole caps, but more importantly, a frozen layer of water ice everywhere below the ground.
Therefore, basically unlimited propellant can be produced. But who will be the first people to land on Mars? We suspect that it probably will either be very rich and adventurous individuals, but more likely, again, governments, because they will be the only ones with enough money. But the more starships land, and the more the colony grows, private enterprises and individuals like us will then soon be able to afford a ticket. Elon's goal has always been to cut the cost of a trip to Mars with return possibility down to $100,000. Now the price is still infinity, so that would be probably a very good price decrease. When the price gets down to this level and lots of people start going to Mars, more than one colony will be created, new businesses will be created, new companies with products we even cannot imagine yet. The same goes for the moon colony, by the way. But since the moon is much nearer to Earth and therefore much cheaper to reach, we think that the moon colony will certainly grow faster than the Mars colony. And assuming by the late 2020s, both colonies will slowly start growing. It's realistic to assume that by the end of the 2030s, humanity will truly become a multiplanetary species. With many people living on the off-world colonies on the moon and on Mars, we think that these off-world colonies will offer many people the chance to begin again in a golden land of opportunity and adventure.
So what do you think? When will humanity be finally a multiplanetary species and have self-sustaining colonies on the moon and on Mars? 2030? 2040? 2050? Let us know what you think in the comment section.
And if you're new to this channel, we would be very glad if you would subscribe, because you will already see in this video that we are really into space exploration, and we will keep doing many more videos on moon colonies, Mars colonies, and other space-related topics.
So see you in the next video. Ciao!
Ciao!